welcome to the Brown Initiative for Discipleship and Evangelism. My name is Ethan Brown, and this is BIDE. This video is being produced in cooperation with the Partnership Program at Gordon-Conwell Theological Seminary, where I am a Doctor of Ministry student in the Outreach and Discipleship Program. If you'd like to learn more about the Partnership Program, I'll put a link for that in the description below. And if you would like to join with me in my endeavors, I'll put a link for that as well, and I'd really appreciate that. That'd be great. The purpose of BIDE is to help people to be effective disciple makers, to reach out into our culture and help people discover life in Jesus Christ, to spread the good news that Jesus is the King of Kings. I want from time to time to spend a little bit of time with you thinking culturally. What is this culture that we're in? I believe to be an effective missionary, and I am afraid that American Christians need to start thinking of themselves as being on the mission field. We need to think of ourselves as missionaries. Well, to be an effective missionary, you need to think a little bit about the culture that you are a part of. When I say that we need to start thinking as missionaries, it is because the world around us has changed, and it has changed incredibly quickly. In 1991, a book was written by a guy named Loren Mead called The Once and Future Church. And the Once and Future Church focuses on the end of Christendom. Christendom is a cultural construct that lasted about 1,500 years. You can look at it as beginning with the reign of Constantine in 325, when Constantine officially makes Christianity a legal religion in the empire. And it quickly becomes kind of the official religion of the empire. After all, it was the religion of the emperor himself, so who doesn't want to be a part of that? Christendom really lasted until just recently. It's very difficult to point out a specific time when Christendom died, but Christendom is no longer a thing. What made Christendom a thing is that Christians, by and large, held the reins of power. We were in charge. We were in control. We set the cultural directions. We were the dominant influence in the world. So you think about the medieval world, for instance. Everybody's a Christian. Really, through the 1500s, everybody's a Christian. Do you live in a world where everybody's a Christian? No, you don't. Before Constantine, we lived in a very different time. The first 300 or so years of the church's existence were very painful and difficult years. They were very faithful years, but they were hard, and there's no way around it. There was a lot of persecution, a lot of martyrdom. And to be a Christian cost you something. It cost you a lot of things. It cost you family connections. It cost you cultural connections. It cost you sometimes the ability to have a job. And sometimes it costs you your property, your freedom, and even your life. And yet somehow Christianity in that context spread very rapidly. What Loren Mead was writing about is that kind of dynamic is arising once again, where we are no longer the dominant cultural influences, that we're no longer in charge of the culture that we're a part of. And when I first read this book in the early 2000s, it seemed almost surreal that I was reading something that I still felt like the cultural realities I was a part of weren't really being described. The church seemed to be very healthy and thriving, and yes, there were non-Christians, there were droves of them, but the culture that I lived in was still very concerned with Christian realities in the early 2000s. The dominant cultural questions still seem to be ones that I recognized and I was familiar with. That's really not the case anymore. Lauren Mead was looking at cultural trends and where things were going, where things had been moving for nearly 500 years. And he very accurately read the way things were headed. He said, we are moving out of power. We are not going to be in control of the levers of power anymore. Even if people that have official office name themselves Christian, the secularism and the worldview that was arising was that there was really this pluralistic world that people needed to marshal and build. It really wasn't going to be a Christian world. And that has arisen. We now live very much in a post-Christian world. Now, once and future is a nice idea. In some ways, I wish that we could be the once and future church, and that the realities that we are entering, I kind of wish it was like the early church faced, because what they faced was a pre-Christian world. The Christian world hadn't been built yet. Christendom was like a fable for them, something that didn't exist. When Christendom finally came, the Christian writers like Eusebius, who finally saw it happen, were thrilled. They were so excited that the government wasn't going to kill them anymore, and in fact was going to kind of prioritize things that they cared about. That was a really big deal to the folks who were first entering Christendom. So that it would be almost nice if we could enter a pre-Christian world, but that's not what we're entering. What you and I are moving into is what's called a post-Christian world, which in a way is already here, and the trends suggest it will continue to advance. Now, when we say we are moving into a post-Christian world, what do we mean by that? Well, it's best understood in contrast to the pre-Christian world. When our brothers and sisters were working to share Christianity in the first century, the idea of Christian was not something that people had a category for. And because they had no category for Christian, they didn't really have an opinion about it one way or the other. When a Christian would approach them and talk with them about, I am a follower of this guy. I believe that he is King of Kings and Lord of the whole world. I believe that he died and has come back to life, and I believe that his death has made a real difference for me. When people heard those things, those were all brand new. They had no cultural context whatsoever for them. And so as they're hearing this story, they don't have an opinion about it. And so they approach it with a sense of maybe some wonder, naivete, maybe some skepticism, but they don't approach it necessarily immediately with hostility. Now, as the years go on and Christians begin to be abused and mistreated by the government, there is a sense of, okay, well, I kind of know what that is, and those people are atheists, or those people are people that eat babies. I mean, these rumors begin to spread. But even then, what is it that Christians really believe? The Romans wouldn't have had a whole lot of understanding of that. So the category Christian might be maligned person as we move into the 200s and toward the 300s. That may be the case. But what they don't have is 1,000+ years of Christian rule. People who were Christians reigning in the name of Christ, who would do all kinds of bad things that the modern culture now looks at and critiques. You see, the modern world does have a category for Christian, and it has some pretty strong opinions about it. Christianity is, in the early century, might have been a foolish choice, but it wasn't an evil one. But we are increasingly entering a space where Christianity is on its heels in the culture, because an awful lot of the culture looks at us and says, I know what you are, and I think you're wrong. And not just wrong, but maybe evil. Now, it used to be that you could approach somebody who was in our culture but wasn't a Christian and assume certain basic understandings of what it meant to be alive and what it means to be a person and all that would be shared because those people grew up in Christendom. Christendom kind of controlled the discursive understandings of what reality was. And so it handed down certain things that everybody just accepted as true. That used to be reality. So you could begin with the idea that the world has got a problem that needs solving, and that problem is human morality and our being out of step with the nature of God. That used to be something you could just count on other people to believe. That's not the case anymore. A whole new different set of ideas and beliefs have arisen as Christianity has receded. And so the things that are important to us, well, they're not necessarily important to them. The answers we're giving are to questions very often that people aren't asking anymore. And if we're going to be able to lead people to Jesus, it's true that we need to be prepared to answer their questions. But it's also true that we need to be able to question their answers. That idea comes to me from Timothy Keller's very short and really powerful book, How to Win the West Again. It's just 50 pages, and I strongly recommend it. It's a really good analysis of our culture. So the things I'm about to share with you come out of that book. I probably will do a little more in a future video in how to respond to these things. But just getting our mind around the world that we live in is my goal here, and offer a touch point with our culture as we think about non-Christians and what answers do they give to what is it that makes my life meaningful? What do I value? What's really important to me? Let me throw just a few that are cultural values that are post-Christian in their nature. I'll start with identity. You have to be true to yourself. That is a value in this culture. Our culture will say that authenticity and being true to your core self, that will give you meaning and purpose in life. And no matter what anybody else thinks, be true to yourself. That's a post-Christian value. You'll note right away that is not a Christian value. Who you are as a person is a person in need of redemption, but our culture no longer believes that. You need to be saved from the idea that you need to be saved in our post-Christian world. The idea of freedom. You should be free to live as you choose as long as you don't do any harm to anybody else. That's how we define freedom. Not freedom from bad things that are breaking me. That's how Christianity would define freedom. I'm becoming free from what's holding me back. But in our world, it's freedom to explore your impulses and be who you are. A core belief in our culture is that you should do what makes you happy, and you just can't sacrifice that for anybody. So pursue happiness has become a central, almost religious tenet in our post-Christian world. How are problems solved? Well, the answer to that is objective science. Science will bring about the solution to all of this world's problems. That's an interesting one to me. COVID-19 was brought to us by gain-of-function research. Science gave us the most significant problem that we have faced so far in this century. But the confidence in science is unshaken. Our culture absolutely believes science will bring the solution to all this world's problems. Morality is a personal matter, not a public matter, and it's certainly not a social matter. Each individual person should be free to determine right and wrong for themselves. And no one can tell another person what is or is not moral. Moral is a personal code. Each of us has a duty and responsibility to build our own personal moral code. Again, that is post-Christian. You cannot find that in Christian doctrine at all. Justice is a huge value in our rising culture. Now, justice is a value to God, but justice as it's defined in our post-Christian world is a splintering thing that drives people apart, because you are more just if you look down on people who disagree with your definition of justice. So justice is about, we are obliged to work for the freedom, good, and rights of everybody in the world. But what does that look like? What is the good of everybody? Well, that is, again, morality is very personal. And history, as it's understood in our world, is bending toward progress and away from religion. These are values of a post-Christian world. And if we're going to communicate the gospel to people, it's important that we get our heads around where people are. What's their headspace? What are they thinking? What are they valuing? Because these are the things, these are the messages that are given to us constantly through the internet, through our news services. It's just a constant barrage. Advertising is built around these principles, these post-Christian ideas. And they are being pushed into the hearts and minds not only of your non-Christian neighbor who has moved beyond Christianity in their own mind, but even into our own hearts. These are the things we are tempted to syncretize into and claim as though they are Christian values when they very clearly are not. My purpose in this video is to begin to help us to think critically and to engage with the mindset of someone who is in what the future church is going to have to address. As we live in a post-Christian society, if we want to be missional within the post-Christian world, then we need to begin to think about how our post-Christian neighbors think. We need to begin to understand what they value and to understand that those values are not entirely wrong. They're actually distortions of what they received from Christendom, because each of the values I just addressed in this video are actually kind of Christian ideas gone to seed after the Christianity has been removed. The Christian guidance is no longer there, but an awful lot of the Christian ideas, this post-Christian world grew out of Christianity. So it's a lot of stuff that we can affirm, even as we have to start asking, well, what do you mean by that? And how is that giving you purpose? And how is that giving you meaning? But we first have to come to terms with, boy, if I'm going to be effective in this world, it's a very different world. But it's the world into which God is sending us. Because God so loved the world that he sent Jesus. And Jesus sent us for the honor of Christ and for the life of the world.